Good afternoon, Pokemon trainers. My name is Gabby Snyder, and I'm joined here by Lou Cromie, and we are in day two, aka Championship Sunday, of the women's tournament hosted on the Victory Road VGC channel. It has been a very exciting day so far in the tournament. If you think back to yesterday's gameplay, and I cannot wait to see the games we're going to get today because there are so many amazing trainers still in the running, and everybody at this point is fighting for that first place prize. Lou, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you, Gabby. I'm so happy to be back behind the desk with yourself. I think it was the first women's tournament that we actually last worked together. And that's one of the things I've loved so much about this weekend is not just obviously the amazing competitive Pokemon play, but the fact that it has provided that safe space for members of our community to come together, play Pokemon, interact with one another, and also for our commentators and our production team to all work together as well. And, you know, particularly with the current global climate, that often isn't a case, and to be able to kind of do it in such a unique and inspiring way, I think has been really awesome. So I'm really looking forward to today. We have got one epic match coming up for our first match, and it's going to feature a couple of classic duo combinations, even in a format which is Series 8, which we're playing at the moment, which only allows for one restricted. We're still going to see some very familiar pairings.
Yeah, I think going back to all of the formats where you have these restricted Pokemon, so the GS Cup formats, there are two Pokemon that tend to stand out and be very centralizing. I'll keep it secret for a little bit longer. I think we're waiting for the players to get set up, but to give you a little hint, maybe if you were watching some streams the other day, we'll be featuring Darya versus Killy. And I know Darya was streaming on her channel yesterday under Miss Darazard. So if you watched any of her games and you think about her team and you think about what I just said, you'll probably be able to put things together. But I'm so excited. You know, I took a look at her team and Killy's team before we went on air, and there's some really awesome text in there. And it's going to be a great matchup. So I hope everybody in chat is super excited.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's been the really cool thing about this weekend, because the format is so new. You know, Series 8 only launched about a week ago, that the meta still hasn't really been solidly defined. And a lot of the time when you turn into a new format, there's this kind of explosive start with loads of really hyper offensive teams, lots of big KOs being taken left, right, and center. And the one thing that I've been really impressed by was the creativity we got to see yesterday. A whole bunch of different restricteds. There weren't kind of just one or two really kind of coming to the forefront. I know previously coming into the tournament, everyone was hyping up Dialga, but we were able to still see loads of those, you know, traditional fan favorites. We saw obviously the Yveltal there. We saw the Xerneas taking center stage as well, and of course those Hoenn legends as well. You got to always have some weather wars up in about whatever format is going on.
Yeah, and honestly, what I've found the most interesting about this tournament is, like you said, the creativity when it comes to team building. You know, I think going into this, a lot of people, myself included, were expecting kind of a repeat of a few of the other grassroots tours that have happened so far in Series 8. But we've seen almost every restricted Pokemon barring maybe Ho-Oh and Lugia, though I think we actually did see a Ho-Oh team yesterday. So just Lugia was missing. And I'm hoping that maybe we can cross that slot off today, or otherwise still see some of those really exciting and newer picks, such as Necrozma. I believe there's one Necrozma in cut. But for now, we're actually going to get started with our match. It looks like the players are in team preview. So to give a quick overview of what they'll be running, we're going to have Darya on the bottom of the screen running Groudon, Gmax, Charizard, Suicune, Venusaur, Kartana, and Raichu. And then we have Killy on the top of the screen running Kyogre, Tornadus, Incineroar, Kartana, Amoonguss, and Regieleki. So you mentioned the Hoenn Legends, Lou. I think that's exactly what we're getting in this game.
100% getting that weather war sort of kicking off day two. And it's those classic combinations I kind of alluded to earlier. You've got that kind of Torn Ogre build with the Kyogre and the Tornadus. And, you know, sometimes there are opportunities where you can just click Tailwind and Water Spout and do absolute devastation on the field. But you do have to watch out for potential Groudon switching in the back that's going to bring the Sun and negate some of that damage that the Water type Pokemon are going to be able to bring out. And particularly if you pair it with that Venusaur that's going to benefit with its Chlorophyll ability, then it's going to be a force to be reckoned with. Remember, they aren't going to be able to prime or revert at this stage. They don't have access to those orbs that create that magic. So whether oh, I know. I mean, that's the thing. You can kind of override the weather a little bit easier. But Killy is going to be kicking off here with Tornadus and Incineroar, whereas on the opposing side of the field, Raichu and Kartana.
Yeah, the Raichu, honestly, and Kartana together is a pretty interesting lead for Darya's team. But, I think this was most likely an indication that she was expecting to see that Regieleki on Killy's side of the field take the stage early on. Raichu certainly is a nice option to have in front of an Incineroar as well. You will have the faster fake out, and as a result, you can ensure that the Incineroar won't move if that's your strategy for the plan. But I think the interesting thing that Darya needs to consider here is that the Tornadus on the field means that there is the threat of Tailwind, and when you have Tailwind and Kyogre in the back uncontested, it's pretty much a game over for a lot of teams, especially if you brought Groudon. So if Darya has the ability to either stop the Tailwind from getting set up, maybe getting a knockout on that Tornadus, or otherwise match it, that's definitely where she needs to be pivoting to right now.
Well, I think a very good switch, resetting the Intimidate drop on that Kartana, particularly in the face of a fire type, is going to be good there for Darya. Incineroar was indeed going for the Flare Blitz. Not even going to go for a fake out in this situation, and Suicune switching and being that water type, going to be able to take that Flare Blitz much better than the Kartana would have done. Revealing as well the leftovers on that Suicune. You've got to remember this is a closed team sheet tournament, so for a lot of our players, game one is going to be critical in scouting out that information to help you through the set.
Yeah, and Suicune was honestly what made me excited about Darya's team in particular. It's a very bulky water-type Pokemon, does get access to Tailwind, and has not been seen as often as its partner Entei. So hopefully we can see the Suicune do some fun work here today.
Oh, an unfortunate miss there on the Tornadus with the Electro Web. Going to do a little bit of chip damage to the Incineroar and lower the speed. But Tornadus has set up the Tailwind on Killy's side of the field. Suicune, however, is going to match that. And that's where that Electro Web is so critical. If you're going to even the playing field with your Tailwinds, you need to try and find another way to gain the speed advantage. And Electro Web from that Raichu would have been key to that situation. But Tornadus being able to nimbly dodge out of the way. And speaking of dodging things, the Incineroar is going to get out of this Pokemon action, go back into his Pokeball, and allow Killy to pivot in another Pokemon from the back to try and capitalize on the speed here. And Kartana is going to be that Pokemon choice. Again, a Pokemon that can apply a lot of pressure to that Suicune. You mentioned that it's a Pokemon that is known to have kind of quite a sizable bunk. So Kartana is going to be looking to try and pick up some big damage here while it can.
Yeah, and the fact that the Kartana comes out now especially is most likely an indication that whatever Killy's last Pokemon is wouldn't have a good matchup against the Suicune or the Raichu. I honestly think it's Kyogre at this point, just because it's rare to bring Tornadus, the Incineroar, and Kartana without the Kyogre. So a good thing for Darya to take note of, but for now, I like that she's chosen just to pivot out the Suicune into her own Kartana. The Suicune did its job, it got Tailwind up, and now it's time for the Kartanas to just duke it out.
Tornadus just going to go for that Protect there, going to save itself from another Electro Web, but is Raichu going to be able to target down onto that Kartana? It is. It finds the accuracy it needs to get a little bit of chip. If this is potentially something like a Focus Sash Kartana, that will of course be broken as well. Kartana is going to be able to go for that Leaf Blade. Again, a really wise switch here from Darya, making sure that in that particular slot, she's making sure a Pokemon's coming into an attack that she's predicted that's going to be able to take much less damage. But something else I think is really critical, that Raichu on the field, if potentially Killy does have something like the Regieleki in the back, then having that Raichu just prevents Killy from really being able to bring that Pokemon out front. It protects Suicune a little bit more.
It really does, and that's going to be key, I think, as we watch the rest of this game play out. The other thing I'm paying close attention to is what exactly these Kartana are going to do. Traditionally, on a Kyogre Tornadus team, you would want Kartana to be the Dynamax Pokemon in this kind of situation, but, both these players are being fairly conservative with their Dynamax as far as I can tell, so I think it'll be really important to note who is the person to lock into their Dynamax first, because whoever that is going to be put at a potential disadvantage with so many Electro Webs and Intimidates being thrown around.
Oh, well, you mentioned the Dynamax, Gabby.
That was not the Pokemon I was expecting. So I'm actually really excited. Tornadus, I think, it isn't really preferred to Dynamax because it is on the frailer side of things. But those max airstreams are going to hurt that Kartana a lot.
Exactly. It's not often the Pokemon of choice, and it has taken that little bit of chip damage. So if it was something like a Focus Sash, then it would be, revealed there. But the Kartana is not going to appreciate those max airstreams, like you said there, Gabby. And it is one of those things. It might be a short-lived Dynamax if you're Dynamaxing a frail Pokemon like the Tornadus. But if you're able to pick up that critical KO that's going to, help out the rest of your team, and if it is indeed that Kyogre in the back, Gabby, then that's going to really help out Killy's side of the field. Tornadus this time not able to dodge out of the way of the Electro Web, and this is where the speed these tiers are really coming into an interesting perspective here. We've got Max Airstream on one side, boosting up the Pokemon on that side of the field, and Electroweb as well, trying to negate the boosts that are being placed on Killy's side.
Yeah, and I'm really curious how Darya's going to power through this. I mean, we do have the benefit of her perspective on the stream, so we can take a guess as to what Pokemon she might be considering for her own Dynamax now that Kartana has been removed. But more importantly, I think that the Incineroar, knowing what her last Pokemon is the Pokemon that she should be targeting down. But there is always going to be the threat of the Kyogre in the back of Killy's party, and if Killy is able to continue to maintain a speed advantage with the help of Max Airstream on the Tornadus, regardless of when Darya sends out that Groudon, or even if she's able to Dynamax it, if Kyogre's staring across it from the field, is faster, has rain, and has water spout, that's going to be a one-hit knockout most likely. It's unfortunate for Groudon that without the primal reversions, it loses access to its same type, or it loses access to sun-boosted fire type attacks, and it just lacks a lot of the firepower that its water counterpart has.
Well, one of the Pokemon you were most excited to see in this battle, Gabby, has gone for the Dynamax. It is going to be that Suicune out in the field, going to be trying to capitalize on its additional bulk there to try and live out some of these attacks. And Raichu going to be a good partner Pokemon here, going for that helping hand, going to be making sure that potentially if there is a water type move going down into that Incineroar, it's going to be able to pick up the KO. Suicune first does have to take that other Max Airstream, and you can see it does still do a sizable chunk of damage. Tornadus being able to stay in its Dynamax form for another turn at this stage. But it's going to be a Max Hailstorm coming out from Suicune. Maybe this could be the end for that Tornadus. It's already taken about a third of damage. And I'm not too sure. The pixels misled me.
Yeah, no, that most likely was coming from an icy wind on that Suicune. So the base power was not there, unfortunately.
Well, that's where the Dynamax doubling its HP really does help out the Tornadus, able to survive out one more turn. Of course, you set the Hail, and that gives that little bit of residual chip, but I think Incineroar got away really well there, being able to activate the parting shot as well, so be reducing the damage output off that Suicune even further onto the next turn, and it does allow Killy to pivot in their Kartana so that it can apply pressure to this Suicune as well.
Yeah, and unlike the Tornadus that Dynamaxed on Killy's side of the field, I don't think Suicune is going to be able to threaten a one-hit knockout on the opposing Kartana. So Darya forced to take a little bit of a step back this turn and try to figure out the best way to pivot. Now, I think that you just have to let the Suicune go down, unfortunately. Maybe try and take out the Tornadus or the Kartana on the way, but if your last Pokemon is Groudon and that's the Pokemon you're trying to position on the field, you just need to get it in safely, because it is going to take just as much damage from a Leaf Blade as a Suicune would, because it does not have that fire typing. So Killy's still in a fantastic spot, and I really like how she's demonstrating how versatile this team is. You can really switch around, you can really adapt to your opponent's strategy, and as long as that Kyogre is safe and fast, it'll still do its job.
And Killy really preparing to make sure Kartana is all prepared for this potential Groudon coming in the back. Gets the speed boost, gets the Leaf Blade going down onto the Suicune that is going to give it a beast boost as well. So its speed will be increased and its attack power. And like you mentioned, Gabby, there is no fire typing on that Groudon. It will purely be a ground type. So it's going to take a lot of damage from this Leaf Blade, particularly as it is now at +1. Raichu going to go for that Electroweb. So, of course, going to reduce the speed down on that Kartana a little bit, and we'll finally be able to vanquish the Tornadus from the battlefield. But I think this Kartana is definitely going to be a very heavy threat. If Killy is maybe able to bring in a Pokemon and override the weather, then that's going to protect the Kartana even more so against any of those fire-type attacks.
Yeah, and Killy can also switch in her Incineroar for free now. Taking down the Tornadus was almost, helpful in that regard. You're going to be able to get an Intimidate down on the Groudon. You're going to weaken the power of those Precipice Blades. And I think that Darya, she might be able to get a little bit more of information from her opponent, maybe find one more knockout somewhere and figure out whether or not that last Pokemon is going to be the Kyogre. But if Killy wants to sort of take a definitive lead in this game, all she really has to do is switch out that Incineroar, maybe after a fake out turn, maybe, just a manual switch or a parting shot, and then get that Kyogre in, take away the weather, and then, click that water type attack. So very well played from from both these trainers. I think that Darya had a bit of trouble positioning herself to get the Groudon on the field in a way that it would be successful. So I'm very curious to see how she's going to adapt going into game 2, assuming this Groudon doesn't have any tricks that allows her to take game 1.
Oh, I like this play here by Killy. I'm going to be breaking the air balloon there on the Raichu and Groudon protecting itself from that potential Leaf Blade. I thought that was actually potentially a call there, thinking the Groudon was going to protect, so let's fake out and double into the Raichu and pick up that KO, get another Beast Boost. But no, the protect on the Groudon there actually really working out for Darya.
It is, but what I'm really curious about is whether or not the Raichu is going to be faster than the Kartana this turn. We saw the Kartana get 1 speed boost from the Airstream and then lose it immediately to the Electro Web. But hypothetically, if Raichu is faster than this Kartana for this turn and Electro Web connects and then Groudon outspeeds, we could be looking at a very different game. You still have to worry about the possibility of a Kyogre in the back, but again, Electro Web could be her win condition.
Oh, a failed double protect out on the Groudon. Electro Web does connect on the opposing Pokemon, will be lowering the speed, but it does put Kartana in a really free position here to go for that Leaf Blade. It's exactly going to be targeting down that Groudon, and a +1 is enough to pick up the one-hit KO, just removing it from the field. And now there's very little that Raichu can do to come back from this. We've seen the little damage that it does with that Electro Web to the Kartana, particularly at +2. And a Flare Blitz from that Incineroar as well. Why not? Incineroar can get in on the action, pick up the KO, and take game 1 for Killy.
Yeah, some great information, though, for both these trainers. I think the double protect from the Darya on that last turn was most likely an indication that she did need that second Electro Web to potentially outspeed the Kartana. Whether or not that's something that she tries to prioritize going into game 2, we'll have to see. But what I'm really excited to figure out as a part of this matchup is what the adaptation is going to be from Darya. Even though we saw the Pokemon she brought, I don't think we saw too much about what exactly their strategy was. We saw the Suicune with Tailwind. We can assume that it might have like a Icy Wind or something like that for an ice type attack, but we didn't see too much else about it. We saw the Kartana, but we didn't see that much about it. We saw the Raichu. We know it has Electro Web Helping Hand, but I feel like there's a lot of unique options that Darya can adapt going into this next game too. But she's going to have to decide how much information she's willing to give up in case they do go to a game 3. As for Killy, I like how she played this game. I think that Tornadus, Incineroar, and Kartana, again, are just such a fantastic core when playing through this weather matchup. And all she has to do is just continue maintaining the speed, on the field with Tailwind, with Max Airstream, maintaining the pressure with those Intimidates and the Kartana, and then, save the Kyogre for the end of the game, assuming that is what she brought. Just very, very well played by them. And I'm very excited to, see this game 2 play out.
Yeah, that Tornadus was absolutely critical, not only for the speed control, which was able to manipulate in so many different ways, being able to go for those Tailwinds, then the Max Airstreams. And I think, putting all kind of your eggs in one basket and going for that Dynamax on the Tornadus, always quite a bold play, but it certainly paid off, able to pick up that KO against the Kartana as well, certainly put Killy in a more favorable position where she could kind of breathe a little bit more of that and protect her Pokemon from that Kartana. And as you saw from her side of the field, if you leave Kartana unchecked, if it's able to get in without taking Intimidates, without taking too much damage, and it can start picking up those KOs and the Beast Boost start rolling, then it is a formidable threat, particularly if you've still got Tornadus hanging around that can go for all of these speed boosting moves as well. And I think that's where the Electro Rep on the Raichu was really critical, and it does fend off potentially bringing something like a Regieleki. But I think ultimately, the beginning of that game was played very defensively with all of those switches, trying to make sure that Pokemon weren't taking a lot of damage from the attacks. But ultimately, if you're switching, then you're not doing a lot of attacking. And Raichu with Electro Web is not going to be the damage-dealing Pokemon of choice. So maybe if you're Darya in this game, you need to come out, be a little bit more hyper-offensive. You could always bring the Venusaur, maybe try and put a few things to sleep. But then you have to watch out, of course, for Tornadus and those Max Airstreams, and potentially even a Taunt. I don't think we saw it in that game, but a lot of them do carry it, and that could shut down a Sleep Powder very quickly.
Yeah, and just to touch on Regieleki for a moment, I don't think you bring Regieleki to a Groudon matchup. I mean, Regieleki is so frail to begin with, and especially with a Lightning Rod user, there's just too much that the Regieleki does not like in that situation. I think you just save it on the bench for maybe a non-Lightning Rod team.
But it's so cute. It's so happy to be here. Well, there are some adaptations already being made. It's going to be the Venusaur coming out next to the Raichu, but it looks like Killy is actually sticking with the same lead that came out in game one with that Incineroar and the Tornadus. This time Kartana's not out in front to take an Intimidate, and I think both Raichu and Venusaur won't mind that at all.
I don't think they'll mind that either. And really, since this is turn one, if that Tornadus does not have access to protect, we saw the fake out flinch at turn one in game one. This would be the perfect opportunity for that Venusaur to try to put it to sleep to get rid of that Tailwind. But, it's possible that Killy will predict that and go immediately for a Flare Blitz into that Venusaur to try and knock it out. So it's a bit of a risky play. I don't know if you necessarily want to make this trade, but it looks like the Tornadus does have protect. So there is more of that information game just slowly being revealed.
Well, a few different mechanics going on there. We had the Protect obviously down on the Tornadus, the Fake Out targeting down the Incineroar, which did leave the Venusaur exposed to something like a potential Taunt. But the Sleep Powder was indeed going into Tornadus. So Killy being able to get through that turn really well. And now Tornadus again sitting in a really prominent position without any kind of Fake Out threat.
Yeah, so very, very well played by Darya there, just respecting that the Incineroar could decide to forego Fake Out and go for a Flare Blitz or something else. Going into turn two, though, again, just more positioning, more switching, and more surprises.
Exactly, and Killy making sure to shut down that Venusaur, going to be going for that Taunt, stopping any Sleep Powders, and Raichu actually going to pivot in on out of there, doing a huge chunk of damage to the Tornadus, really trying to make sure that it doesn't stay on the field as long as it did in game one, trying to negate the threat as early as possible, bringing the Suicune to the field. And I like this switch in here. We know Suicune can go for something like a Tailwind, or even, like we said, we don't know if it is Icy Wind, but could be Icy Wind to try and start getting that speed set up into play. And Incineroar, of course, not going to be dealing too much damage to that Suicune at all. But you got to watch out for another Taunt from that Tornadus.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that the Incineroar targeted the Raichu there. I think that's very great prioritization by Killy, since they recognize that the Raichu was really the crux of Darya's win condition.